Okay, we're going to talk a little bit, because I thought we'd get interested to get you guys in, actually, because I'm not necessarily thinking you're great experts around the whole peer-to-peer finance space. Although, I mean, I certainly know, Francis, you've at EPM have had quite a bit of contact with the sector. Yeah. But you guys have, from both an advisory perspective and from a tax wrapper and effectively plan status, know your way around the industry, really, and about how, if the industry wants to get itself a peer-to-peer ISA, what's going to happen next? Yeah. Now, none of us know. I mean, we heard earlier on is that I think it was Giles has been slightly more cautious, saying maybe next year it might come in. Who knows? Somebody might come in at the end of this year. In a sense, we don't know. It's on its way. Yeah. Is it really going to help them very much, or actually is it going to be a bit of a problem? Because the reality of it is, it's not quite as easy as it sounds to do this kind of stuff, is it, Francis? Why don't we kick off with you first?
No, it's not. But I think, like all things, if you've got a problem, if you've got a challenge, find a solution.
Yeah.
And I think the Treasury is trying to go down a particular route for ISAs. They were given a political time bomb.
Yep.
They're trying to do their best. But my own feeling is that to try and create an asset class that is just particularly linked to one provider is a mistake.
Yeah.
Now, what we're already seeing in the marketplace is some innovations around listed bonds, which provide the finance to peer-to-peer houses, which get around these limitations, are transferable, can be liquidated.
So you don't think they should go down a separate P2P
I think I can see how that is attractive as a political solution. But like anything, and I'm sort of slightly reminded of the insurance ISA.
Yes.
Where did that go?
Yeah,
Where
exactly.
did that
Where
go
did
to?
that go to?
My fear is that exactly the same will happen if we go down the line of peer-to-peers having their own ISAs. Because where does it go to?
But the problem there surely is, and you're a pioneer in the whole kind of SIPP and ISA space. You were one of the first people who were behind setting up SIPPs, so, which is one of the big tax wrappers that's out there, probably one of the most successful tax wrappers along with ISAs. If they're going to just have a conventional ISA, how's the industry going to make it work? Because they don't have securities and they don't have funds. Yeah? So, well, that's not true. They do. Some do have funds, yeah?
Sure.
And some do have securities. You talked about mini bonds, yeah? Yeah. But it doesn't really sit...
I'm talking about listed bonds.
Yeah, listed bonds as well.
Not mini bonds.
Absolutely.
This is a completely different animal.
But a lot of them don't sit in either of those buckets. It's not going to work, is it?
Well, it's going to be more difficult because it's all about transferability. It's all about ownership. And I think one of my fears is that we're going to see, in a similar way as happened to SIPPs, is that we're going to see institutions coming in and running money. And that is then a huge margin being taken out
intermediated
of the returns.
Yeah.
And the whole attraction of SIPPs, when I kicked it off back in those amazing days of 1990, I think March the 19th, I think we're putting our money on. That's the first ever SIPP, 1.1 million. But the problem is that you get institutions coming in then to run money. That costs in terms of margin. And the whole idea behind SIPPs, and to some extent self-select ISAs, is that the individual should have choice.
Yeah.
Now, what is quite interesting about the peer-to-peer market is that we're already seeing people abrogating responsibility as investors. What they're doing is they're going for, if you like, modeled solutions, rather than actually taking on the full investment choice that they should be exercising. But anyway, I shall...
Stephen, you're nodding away there. I mean, there's going to be a bit... It's going to be problematic, isn't it?
I think so.
Are you on? No.
I think so. I mean, I started in self-administered schemes in 1979, which were corporate schemes. And one of the most exciting things was the investment in British industry. And
we'll come around again.
Many firms on the back of using their pension fund expanded very, very well. But it did turn, and it turned into an investment world. And one of the concerns I have particularly about the ISA is that the SIPP world, quite honestly, has just come to the end of a 5-year bender in terms of accepting esoteric alternative investments. If this room was full of SIPP providers and you said the word alternative, they'd run out screaming. The ISA's not been there yet, and really the concern I have about ISA is it's a very easy thing to market. You put an advert in the Daily Mail, you put it in whatever, and it could have an awful lot of money coming to it that was utterly inappropriate. You know, that is one of the fears that I do have about that side. The SIPP world...
Actually, just on that side,
sure.
do you think that many advisors, for instance, because I talk a lot to platforms and they go, we'd love to tap the IFA market eventually, the wealth advisor market. Do you think they'll ever get there in the next few years?
No.
No.
They're scared stiff. Is there an advisor today?
No.
No, I'm an ex-IFA myself that also has done SIPPs and SASs. It was very noticeable. Most of IFAs are running absolutely scared of doing anything. They can't get PI. The regulators are on their backs all the time, so it's going to be the direct market. I would love to see, and this is very counterintuitive, I want to see what happens when it goes wrong. How do the platforms control it when people do start going bust? We've had a recession, we've had a depression, near as damn it. Nobody in this room has seen the downturn in the UK market. The peer-to-peers have hit when the market's coming back up again. Love to see what's going to happen when it comes back down again.
Francis, in terms just looking also practical, in terms of practical issues as well, I've known Francis for many years, and whenever I run into you, quite often say, oh, I've had, various people, all constant visits from, the regulators and the HMRC. It's the nature of the business, really, isn't it? It's what you do. You're paid to deal with to deal with the regulators. Are the platforms underestimating the nitty-gritty of having to deal with the actual administration, the fiduciary requirements of running an ISA and SIPP, actually, the same issue? How big a problem is it?
I think it's massively underestimated, to be honest. I mean, probably the biggest chapter in our board meetings is around regulation and the constantly shifting ground that we have around regulation. We're seeing, continuous changes in CAS rules, continued extension of the regulator into areas of businesses that are completely, and just picking up your point in terms of being counterintuitive, go against the investor actually taking on his own risk.
Because the regulators, let's be honest, are a bit nervous about people taking decisions.
Well, unfortunately, I go back a long time with the regulator. In fact, I was actually discussing regulation with the Financial Services Authority when SIPP regulation didn't actually exist, but we could see them sniffing around, and I thought it was probably a good idea on behalf of the industry that we actually went and talked to them to try and assuage them of certain views. But we do seem to have moved a very long way. I mean, I was dealing with a really good guy who head of retail policy at the FCA, Keith Matthews, who said, and I think this made enormous sense, a man may make a fool of himself, but a firm may not make a fool of a man. And I thought that actually encapsulated what self-direction, self-investment was all about. But we've moved way beyond that. Now we have situations where, and Stephen was talking about this in terms of some of the investments that have been out there in the SIPP market that have been peddled, where a man can actually knowingly make a fool of himself and then come back and say, well, I want to be paid out, thank you. I want to be compensated. That's not good enough.
And that's what could happen to the industry if it's not careful.
And that really could happen to this industry if they're not careful.
And in the meantime, as we power towards a lunch break, that is the lunch break, that's the reason I'm saying it, and there's a big red sign up here, I'm going to ask these gentlemen, thank you very much, put your hands together.